Can we talk about reserves first?
Okay.
Just in terms of the money that's there. What do you think of this notion that the city's sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars that could be used to reduce taxes?
Well, that's just silly. You don't use one-time money to reduce ongoing taxes because then you create an operating deficit bow wave. Now, in reality, we have had a lot of fiscal prudence, squirreling away money when times were good, which actually did allow us to give a one-time rebate on taxes for 2017. That's precisely what we're doing. And we're sitting at a place that is somewhere between healthy and very strong, according to the bond rating agencies. And to me, that is really a sign of fiscal prudence and gives us the flexibility to do things in bad times, like freeze taxes that we did this year.
How much of that money is actually already allocated? Do you know exactly what it'll be going for?
There's a big chunk of it. So, for example, there's a reserve in there for perpetual maintenance of cemeteries. I always use that example because you don't want to be touching that money. It has to be there for the cemeteries in the future. There is and there's money in there, for example, that is a revolving fund for land purchases, and we'll need a big chunk of that money for land purchases for the Green Line. So, there's a lot of things like that in there. There is unrestricted money. The largest bit of unrestricted money is in the Fiscal Stability Reserve, which we call the Rainy Day Fund. We have to remember that $100 million of that has already been set aside for flood-related work that has not yet been done. But there is still a fair bit left in there. It's getting close to what the rating agencies call a very strong rating, which is at 15%, but we're taking nearly $100 million out, if memory serves, this year for one-time things, including tax relief.
You mentioned at this morning's Q&A the words airport and LRT and Olympics in the same sentence, which created some buzz, I guess.
Did it?
Do you want to...
Thankfully, something in that speech created some buzz.
Do you want to clarify more on...
Yeah, it's very clear that under Route Ahead, we have a roadmap for the next 30 years of transit investments, and that's a really good thing. We never had that before. Transit was always very ad hoc. The airport transit connection is quite low on the list. But that said, if we were to get a whole bunch of federal funding for something like the Olympics, that would actually allow us to accelerate the whole list. We are already building most of the BRTs on there, for example. But if we were able to accelerate the whole list, that would be a great thing, and that would mean that airport LRT connection as well as an extension to the Northeast Line in order to serve that would happen sooner than we have currently anticipated.
Is the Green Line at the very top of that list?
Yes.
So it would also mean...
Well, the Green Line's getting built regardless of the Olympics. The question is what comes after that.
Could you talk a little bit about this? Canadian Press had a story this morning about an open letter of the mayors, including yourself, on
yes.
the issue of revenue tools. So perhaps you could...
Yes, so the mayors of all the big cities got together and wrote this big piece. So for example, I believe today in Toronto they're talking about road tolls at their council meeting. So he talked about that. In Ottawa, they're looking at a new subterranean tunnel for trucks under downtown. Sounds a bit science fiction-y to me, but good for them. And of course, in Alberta, we're continuing our conversations on stable, predictable funding for cities from the province through some sort of a new fiscal framework that we'll be able to talk more about in the new year.
So how does that go with my favorite topic of taxing powers?
I know that's your favorite topic, but I don't think there's much appetite for that. And I said this morning at the Chamber, I would be surprised if there was anything in the fiscal framework, despite other than a couple of very marginal things where we need to do a little bit of cleanup between the city and the province, example on hotel taxes. I'd be surprised if there was much appetite for that. What there is big appetite for is revenue sharing. And I've said before, and I'll say again, that the first principle of the fiscal framework has to be the Hippocratic principle, do no harm. But if you can make the system work better, make the system work better.
And I know you haven't been able to look at them in detail, but there was the recommendations from
the Marijuana Task Force, I think it's called.
Marijuana Task Force. Some of them included growing inside, like up to, I think, four plants. Mail order, retail separate from alcohol where possible. What do you think on those kind of preliminary
those things seem logical to me. Certainly, City Council's perspective has been that we ought to allow some home growth but have a limit on it. 4 seems a bit low, but they're experts, I'm not. So I'm happy to take that. The province will have to figure out the retail strategy, and we will work with them to do that. I personally do favor not having alcohol and marijuana sold in the same places, because I also think that'll create some more business opportunities likely. I did notice that they seem to be recommending an age of 18. I have to tell you, although it's not City Council perspective, I was very convinced by the Canadian Medical Association's work on this that it really ought to be 21, or potentially even potency limits up to 25. So I'll question the 18. I'll have to read the report and see where they came up with that. But beyond that, what we really needed was a framework in which we could work on the city stuff, and I think we've got that now.
And are you guys talking with the province now or starting to engage with them more?
Yes, we really needed this federal government framework in place, but we will continue to engage with the province on the stuff that impacts the city. It's complicated stuff, and whether or not you are in favor of legalization, I'm not sure that I am. The city nonetheless has to be ready for it.
So it sounds like most of the city's major concerns on this were addressed.
Well, we got the framework that we need to work within now, and that's really, we wanted to make sure that these questions were addressed. What I now need to do is determine whether the answers to the questions in the task force report are answers that would satisfy the city's needs.